Hey guys, Coach Logan here again with a new series on Blunders by World Champions. I've been enjoying Coach Matthews' series on how to play like a world champion, so I thought maybe I'd give the other side of that, how to not play like a world champion. Sometimes while it's inspiring to see a world championship play at a high level, I think it's also kind of inspiring to see, that the best players ever, make horrible mistakes. So when we make them ourselves, it does not mean, we can't play chess at a good level. It's something to work on. And one more thing I'll say before jumping in, I'm positive that there's a million, videos, articles, books on this topic. It's a popular one. I'm going to try to do this without using any of those because I feel like I want to try to make mine as unique to me as possible, but I'm sure there's going to be overlap with some of it. So just bear with that. And the last thing I'll say is I am not limiting myself to only games that were played, in World Championship matches, nor when the players were themselves, the world champion. So you'll see what I mean in this. So first, let's look at one that actually is from a World Championship match. This one is from Carlsen Anand. So it has our current world champion, Magnus Carlsen, and he's playing white here against Vishy Anand. This is from 2014. And he's been playing a beautiful game so far. Yeah, he's just been totally spatially squeezing black. This is one of those positions where, this was a very instructive game for me. White has pretty bad pawn structure, it looks like, with these doubled isolated pawns, but black doesn't really have a great way to get at it. And white's pieces are just so fantastic. Every piece on white's side is kind of better than black's corresponding piece. Like white's rooks are better, white's minor pieces are better. White's pressuring this h6 pawn. But here Carlsen made a very hasty move in a good position. He played, let me just get the mouse here, he played king to d2. And so I want to give you guys a chance to see if you can show how to refute the moves of these world champions. So see if you can figure out what black should play here. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. Okay, keep your video paused if you want more time, but I'm going to continue. So one tactical idea that we mention a lot to the kids is loose pieces drop off. Loose pieces drop off. When you have pieces that are undefended, they are like fuel for your opponent's tactic, and vice versa. When your opponent has loose pieces, you should be looking for tactics. Magnus has this loose rook on g4. And now that he's moved his king to d2, the two of those can kind of be caught together in kind of a nasty tactical idea. The move here, knight takes e5. Point being, this is now attacking the rook, as well as the c4 pawn. And you might say, well, okay, can't we just take that knight? Can't we play rook takes e5? But the problem is then black can just take your rook, and then black has won a rook and a pawn for a knight, which is clearly winning. But if white tries instead to play, so you might think, okay, well, can't white play rook takes g8, and then after rook takes g8, then they can take the knight. Problem is this in-between move here, knight takes c4 check. After rook takes g8, black does not recapture right away, they throw in this check. Now, with this check, white can't take black's rook on h8 yet, because their king is being attacked. If they try to go to a square to attack the knight, like say king to d3, and say, okay, if you move your knight, then I will take your rook. If you take my rook, then I will take your knight. That might all sound well and good, but now black has this final move that makes this work. Knight to b2 check, once again with an in-between move. The king cannot go somewhere to attack the knight. It doesn't have access to the c2 square, so it's got to move, I don't know, it's just somewhere bad, king e2. And now black recollects the rook. At the moment, black is up 2 pawns. I think they're going to stay up 2 pawns because if white tries to take here, then black can just grab on g2. So this should just be winning for black. Okay, so kind of amazingly, Magnus missed this, and almost even more amazingly, Vichy missed it as well. After king to d2, Anand did not play knight takes e5. He played pawn to a4, and it really shows like kind of the power of psychology in chess. I think Anand was probably felt he was losing the whole game, and then when an opportunity came up, he missed it. He played a4 rather quickly too. I think he only spent like a minute or two on it. And there's a famous clip if you watch footage of that world championship where Magnus is just like, I think after he played king to d2, he realized what a mistake it was, and he's just like sweating bullets, trying not to show it on his face. And once Vichy played a4, Magnus just gives this like stares up in relief that he didn't find it, and then immediately played king e2, and now the tactics don't work because there's no knight takes c4 check, and white did go on to win. So that was one incredible blunder from a world champion. The next one I wanted to show is by, I'm just going to go in reverse order of the world champions. So we had Magnus. The world champion before him was Vishy Anand, the one he was playing in this. And the one I wanted to show from Anand was actually, this was one when he was not world champion, and that's what I mean. I'm not limiting myself to only from when they were world champion. Sometimes I'll show games from their youth. This was one from, I think it was 1988, and he was over 2,500. That was, I think, the year he made Grandmaster, or right around then, so I'm not sure if he was a Grandmaster or very close to it, but he was clearly a strong player. He was a 2,500 level player, and he was playing black here. And he managed to lose a game in 6 moves, which is something I've done before too, so it made me feel better to see such a strong, transformative player lose a game so quickly. But he was playing black. White started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. This is called the Petrov variation. It has a reputation for being uber solid. Caruana played it in the World Championship last time in 2018 and drew every game as black with this against Magnus, so it's clearly pretty solid. White takes the pawn. Now, there's a famous trap here involving what happens if black plays knight takes e4. I'm not going to go into that. There's a million videos on that. Just look up, beating the copycat in chess. Instead, Anand played the correct move, pawn to d6. Now, knight back to f3, and now, and only now, he plays knight takes e4. All of this is fine. This is all well-trodden theory. And here, white played the move knight to c3. And what black almost always does here is they just play knight takes c3. White recaptures with the d-pawn. And black just says, okay, like, look at this. We've swapped a pair of minor pieces already. The e-file's open. Look at this really, kind of dry pawn structure. Try to show me an advantage here. I don't believe you. And frankly, they've been pretty successful at that. This opening really is solid. But Anand actually played a horrible, horrible blunder here. Rather than playing knight to c3, he played the move bishop not pawn to f5, bishop to f5 to defend the knight. And once again, I'm going to give the audience a chance. I'm going to pause my video, take another sip of my coffee, and give the audience a chance to figure out what white should do here to punish this bishop f5. So, okay. Okay, keep your video paused if you want more time. But once again, we're going to see this idea of loose pieces and a somewhat exposed king. In the last problem, the exposed king was relevant too because of that in-between check. And here, white can play this sort of thematic move in some of these lines, queen to e2. And the point with this is it is pinning the knight. It's threatening the knight. So we're threatening to just play knight takes e4 here. For instance, if black played something like knight to c6, we're just taking this knight. Bishop takes and white wins a piece. But black does not have a good way to deal with this, though. If they play d5, well, that defends the knight temporarily, but the knight is still pinned. So white can just put pressure on the pinned piece with pawn to d3. They're going to win that knight for a pawn on the next move, so that's clearly bad. But if black tries the most logical move, which I'm sure Vichy thought worked, if he plays queen to e7, which both defends the knight and breaks the pin. This would work if white, if white were careless here and played like d3. Black just moves his knight or trades knights, and this will probably have a queen trade, and this is absolutely fine for black. The problem is white has this, again, this nasty in-between move here, knight to d5, and now, believe it or not, there's actually nowhere good for the queen to go. If the queen goes off the file, like something like queen to d7 or queen to d8, now once again white can play d3, and this knight is hanging on e4 and it's pinned. But if they try to maintain the sort of the defense along the file, like say something like queen e5, or even more disastrously, or actually queen e5, just knight takes e5, but equally disastrously queen to e6, just runs into this family fork here on knight takes c7, which forks the king, the queen, the rook, and it's just game over. So Anand resigned after queen to e2. So 6 moves, right? That was 6 moves. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, and then bishop f5. That was move queen e2. Yeah, queen e2, and he resigned. Okay. So actually, there's a funny story about this game. I'm not totally sure. It's sort of like one of those chess rumors, so I don't want to name the participants involved. But apparently, there was a game like this the year before that might have influenced Anand, and it was between 2 grandmasters who supposedly agreed beforehand that they were gonna just take a draw, or do what's called a grandmaster draw, where they play out a few moves because they're supposed to, and they just play a boring position and get a quick draw. It's really not a good thing when people do that. You should play your games honestly and try to win. But in that game, the person playing black played this bishop f5 move before white played 6 queen e2, and the person playing white realized this was a horrible, horrible blunder, but didn't want to break that honor code with the other grandmaster and not take a draw. So what he did was he literally put his finger on the square and polished it for a bit and just cleared it off, putting on this e2 square, so that the other grandmaster knew that it was a horrible blunder, and then he went on to just play something else. I think he ended up just taking the knight or something like that, and they ended up getting a draw. And I think Anand knew about this game but wasn't aware of that situation, and just thought that, hey, this bishop f5 move looked solid, and didn't give it the thought that it deserved, and and it was a pretty embarrassing loss for him. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap that up with that. But yeah, I find this really interesting, looking at horrible moves by fantastic players.